Good morning, everyone. It's Dr. Arlene Diamco, the MultiDimensional MD. Thank you so much for joining me today for episode 139 of the MultiDimensional MD. And today I'm going to talk about dealing with feelings of abandonment because it's been an unusual spring. Usually, spring is a time of energy and more activity. And we've had that, but I've also been seeing themes of people feeling really tired, fatigued, and just taking a while to kind of step into the energy of the spring. And along with that, I've also been seeing themes of abandonment issues. And this is something that's very normal for people to experience. Everyone deals with this at some point in their life because it's a part of the normal human experience, whether abandonment from a loved one crossing over or just feeling left out in general. And we got a lot of that through the pandemic, from school things, from professional issues. So I'm going to go through what abandonment looks like, what it looks like in children, what it feels like in the body, what you can do for yourself, and how you can help loved ones as well. So let's start with, what does abandonment look like? Sorry, my dog is there. So, shh. Okay, I hope that's not too loud for everyone. So abandonment can look like clinging to relationships, maybe even staying in unhealthy relationships or needing constant reassurance. And if it's like that, we call this anxious attachment. So there's a lot of anxiety to relationships and attachments. This can foster some codependency, people pleasing behavior to avoid being hurt, a fear of being rejected by loved ones, by friends, by colleagues, by peers, by anyone really. And sometimes that codependency can come off as a feeling of needing to control or be controlled. So as Annie Lamott says, over-helping is the sunny side of control. So sometimes if you feel like you're over-helping, over-giving, expending your energy at the sake of your own health to people please, then that is a clinging kind of anxiety, anxious attachment. And then there can also be issues of sabotaging relationships before you get hurt. So difficulty connecting with people or being intimate, being afraid to get close, fear of intimacy, and maybe even anger and jealousy. So keeping people at arm's distance to avoid being hurt. So this is more avoidant behavior, and it can foster feelings of distrust as well. It's like you never quite feel safe. So you have anxiety kind of attachment, and then you have avoidant behavior. So a different kind of attachment. But you can also get a combination of the two, especially if you've had some fear, feeling afraid of caregivers growing up. You might look like having like mood swings or difficulty regulating emotions. Hold on one thing. This is my puppy. I gotta throw the ball for her. This is the trouble with doing this at home. But you can have a combination of those two, because these are just descriptive terms. It's not meant to really group or categorize things completely, but to help us understand feelings of abandonment, to help us be able to address them with our understanding. So yes, you can have any combination of this, and you can subconsciously, we may find ourselves being treated in the same way that we were as children. For some reason, our ego loves things to feel the same, even if it is uncomfortable. If it's a pattern that we're used to, then the ego, in a way, likes that. It feels safe, quote, safe for the ego, but even though it is not necessarily the healthiest or the most balanced way to live. So that gives you an understanding of like what abandonment might look like. So if you have any of those tendencies, then to consider, do you have any feelings of abandonment? And they can be really deep and buried because you might be protecting yourself from feeling them. And that's okay. So just start to be curious and start to consider it. And then similarly in children, what does abandonment feel like in children? So it's a feeling of separation anxiety. They don't want to leave you, trouble going to school, or maybe trouble going to sleep or staying asleep on their own. Panic if they're alone or panic feeling without you. And it's not like every time that kids feel like this, it is due to abandonment issues or there's a problem, because it's very normal for children to want to be cared for or feel like they are need to be with an adult caretaker. That is a very normal way to feel. Kind of throw the ball again. So, um, very similar to adults, but you can see how it stems from childhood. And that leads us to what to what does like what can contribute to these feelings of abandonment? And then we're going to go to what abandonment feels like in the body. So what could lead to feelings of abandonment? So birth trauma, that's that initial separation. And so any difficulty in the birth, this is when you're, I mean, it's the separation physically from the mother. So it's an initial parent mother wound. It doesn't mean that every birth is traumatic, but it is a consideration. There could be emotional instability in the family. There could be um, just a lack of emotional support. So maybe even your emotional needs were met, but you didn't feel like I mean, maybe your basic needs were met, but maybe you didn't feel like your emotional needs were supported. And it's not that your parents didn't love you per se. It is because that they had the same feelings themselves. And so they were not necessarily equipped to support you in the way that you felt you needed. Throw this ball again. um, so, and then the regular issues in family transitions, whether it's through big moves, divorce, or issues of infidelity. If a loved one crosses over, it's so natural to feel like you're abandoned. It's hard when you're left behind, and having to deal with all the repercussions of that. Any kind of neglect, of course, in childhood or any kind of abuse. Also, serious injury. So, if you had to go to the hospital a lot, you can feel really left out or just feel left out in life in general. And other traumatic events, including lack of any basic needs. So, not just your emotional needs, but any basic needs. So then what does that feel like in the body? It can feel like you don't deserve to be loved. And that can show up as indigestion, aches or pains, a feeling of heaviness or weight on you, mood issues, so feeling really down or very anxious, as we talked about before. It can show up as swelling or inflammation in the body, maybe for a reason that you can't necessarily identify, or you go to the doctor and they say that everything looks okay even though you don't feel well. You could have issues with weight. So you could feel underweight or overweight, and both can be protective mechanisms. One, it's hiding in different ways. So hiding in size or having a cushion layer to help you hide and protect yourself. So I want you to be able to look at this in a very understanding way for yourself, in a really compassionate way. All of these things aren't meant to be like doom and gloom, like, because you realize it doesn't mean that it has to stay that way. It's actually the first step in healing, is to recognize what's already there. So when you do that, what can you do for yourself? Well, the first step is to really be present with yourself, to hug yourself in all ages. So you can consider when you felt like that, or maybe when these things might have stemmed from in childhood, and then hug those different aspects of you in. And I'll do this pretty regularly as issues come up, emotional things for myself or physical symptoms. Then I'll go into the core of it and consider, and I just listen and get really quiet. And it can take courage, because sometimes often those feelings aren't comfortable. So it's learning to be comfortable with your own discomfort and just breathing that in, hugging that in bit by bit. Doesn't have to be all at once. It's the way that you are okay with it. And then you get to choose to be there for yourself. So really, you're choosing not to abandon yourself. So then every day you choose to take a conscious step to take care of yourself. And it can be just making sure you have your basic needs: food, rest, exercise, water, connection. If you just take a little step for yourself in a conscious way every day, that will be your hug into yourself so that you are not abandoning yourself. And just one step every day to do that can really help. And caution, because there are many layers to this. Abandonment issues can feel really deeply rooted. So many times for myself, I feel like, oh, this is no longer a problem. I don't feel left out with certain things. And then something will trigger it where it like bubbles up again. And I'm wondering, why am I feeling this again? So you just be gentle with yourself. You can't rush it. It doesn't have to make logical sense. So just be curious to reflect on your fears. Have some courage to reflect on them, to start to understand them, because the issue also tells you how to heal. So if you are recognizing issues of abandonment, then it's also telling you to not abandon yourself, to see yourself, to hear yourself, to hug yourself in, and to do that step by step. So, what can you do for loved ones feeling abandoned? First, it's an understanding. Understanding, again, isn't an excuse, but it helps in understanding. It helps to process things. It helps to not take things as personally. Because if you are on the other side of that relationship, whether it's a codependency or a lack of trust, it can be difficult for both sides. So have some presence and acknowledge that their fears are a normal way to feel, and acknowledge your own fears of however you're feeling are also a normal way to feel. So tell them when you will be leaving and when you'll be returning. So I do this with my kids. I do this with my loved ones, because it's that unknown factor can easily trigger fear. So the more that you can let someone know, even simple things like, I'm going, for the kids, like going to school this time, I'm going to pick you up. I'll see you afterwards. Just reassuring, and that more information, you're or more concrete information you're able to relay, just to give some parameters on those feelings of when they might be without you. And it's comforting for them to know to have a heads up when they won't see you, have a heads up when they will see you again. So it just helps the ego mind to be able to comfort the self. So I hope that gives you some tips in this quick live stream podcast on dealing with feelings of abandonment. This runs so deep for everybody, and for many people, and everybody, I mean, deals with issues of abandonment at some point. And if you feel like you're having a really hard time dealing with them for yourself, then absolutely get help, get professional help, get mental health help. You can come see me in my office. You can come for attention trauma release exercise class. You can come for cranial osteopathic treatment. We have many ways to look at this and to help dive into it deeply but gently, so that things can unfold and uncurl in a way that is manageable and comfortable for you. And then you can release some of this heaviness that you feel and regain some of the energy that is trapped from trying to contain these feelings. So take a step every day to just tend to yourself like this, and consider if abandonment feelings are something that you are dealing with, and I would be happy to help you. And if you have any questions on anything I mentioned here, then feel free to leave a message in the comments. I'd be happy to get back to you. You can also connect with me on Instagram at All Worlds Health, on Facebook, All Worlds Health and Pediatrics, and on my website, you can sign up for my e-love letters. I send them out once a week at allworldshealth.com. Lots of love to you. I believe in you, so I hope that you believe in you too. I will see you next week at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, and I hope you can hear me behind my little puppy. barking there. She's barking for her ball. So lots of love to you. Have a great rest of your week.